This is the very first episode in a series of lessons which will be live lessons. These lessons will be tackling all the different aspects of the language. We shall have some grammar lessons, lessons tackling vocabulary, lessons including some tips how to improve your English skills. I'm talking here about the 4 language skills. Those are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. You will find also in these live lessons videos which talk about professional English, business English. If you happen to be a university or a college student, also you will find some of the lessons, some of these live lessons tackling academic English. This is the kind of English that you can use in your university or college assignments, things like presentations required from you. You can also find this academic English extremely handy for you in writing pieces of research, in writing academic papers, and so on. And after a lot of thinking, I decided that the very first lesson, that the very first live lesson for me on the channel will be typically about English grammar, because this is an aspect of the language, this is a side of the language that concerns a lot of learners. Many of the learners of English are pretty concerned about grammar. They fear it, they are scared of it, because they find themselves not competent enough in dealing with English grammatical rules and so on. So we shall be trying to simplify them as much as we can in order to deliver the idea and to drive it home to our viewers and to our audience. Right, so as the title of the video says, today's video will be about inversion. And inversion is a technique that's used in English writing. So let's be honest from the very beginning of the session today that this lesson, inversion, is not a grammar lesson that's typically used in everyday conversations or in everyday English, like everyday dialogues. No, inversion is a technique that you use in your writing in order to improve it, in order to make it more formal, more literary, more academic. So it's pretty useful for people who are required to write texts in English, to write things like emails, like reports, like academic papers, research, and so forth. Right, so when we say inversion, what is the meaning of the word inversion itself? So the word inversion means exchanging places. So when we talk about the inversion of A and B, this means that we are going to exchange the places of A and B. If A is in a particular place and B is in another place and we invert them, this means that we exchange their places. So since the lesson is called inversion, this means that there are 2 things in the sentence that we are going to exchange places. Yes, and these are the subject and the first auxiliary verb. So when you make an inversion in an English sentence, what you do is that you exchange the places of the subject and the first auxiliary verb. Some people mightn't be familiar with what a subject is and what an auxiliary verb is. Let's take the first example. When we say, Amanda is happy at the moment. Amanda is happy at the moment. So the subject is the person or the thing that comes at the very beginning of the sentence. So when I say Amanda is happy at the moment, who is happy? Who is performing the verb? That's Amanda. That's the person coming at the beginning of the sentence. So Amanda in this sentence is the subject. Another example. When I say that our company is making a lot of profit this year, our company is making a lot of profit this year. So what is making a lot of profit, or who is making a lot of profit? It's our company. And as you can see, this is coming at the beginning of the sentence. The sentence says, our company is making a lot of profit. So who is performing the verb, or what is performing the verb? It's the company, which comes at the start of the sentence. So our company is the subject of the sentence. Right. So this is the first term, which is the subject. So if somebody wants to ask what the subject is, it's simply the person or the thing that carries out the verb, that performs the verb, that does the verb, and it comes at the beginning of the sentence. That's the typical convention. That's the normal structure of a sentence, is for the subject to come at the beginning of the sentence. Right. What is the auxiliary verb? Because we said that in inversion, what we do is that we exchange the places of the subject and the first auxiliary. So what is the first auxiliary? Let's take another example. When I say, the children have done their homework. The children have done their homework. As we said earlier, the children is the subject because that's the person performing the verb, right? And where is the verb? We notice here that the verb doesn't consist of one word. It consists of two words. So the sentence says, the children have done their homework. So have done, this is the verb. And to be grammatically accurate or to be grammatically precise, we call it the verb phrase. In English grammar, the word verb phrase, it means the group of words making up the verb. So when I say, for example, the children have done their homework, have done is the verb phrase. When I say, I will be meeting Sam tomorrow, I will be meeting Sam tomorrow. So the verb phrase here is will be meeting, because that's the group of words making up the verb. So these three words, will be meeting, are called the verb phrase because these three words together make up the verb. Excellent. So when I say the children have done their homework, we find that the verb doesn't consist of a single word. No, it consists of two words, which are have and done. In the other example that I have just said, when I said, I will be meeting Sam tomorrow, will be meeting, so the verb phrase here consists of three words. Actually, sometimes the verb phrase consists of four words, like in this example. By 2027, the bridge will have been built. So by 2027, the bridge will have been built. So as you can see, the verb phrase here consists of four words. Will have been built. Awesome. So this means that a verb phrase is a group of words making up the verb. Sometimes the verb phrase consists of two words, like have done. Sometimes it consists of three words, like will be meeting, and sometimes it consists of four verbs, like will have been built. Awesome. Does this mean that the verb is always a phrase? Does this mean that the verb always consists of more than one word? Not really. Look at this example. We can say, for example, Susan likes pizza. Susan likes pizza. Likes is the verb, and it's not a verb phrase. It's a verb that consists of only one word. Another example, we say, we went to the party. We went to the party. So the verb here consists of only one word, and that's went. Awesome. So now we can tell apart the difference between a verb and a verb phrase. A verb is when the verb consists of a single word, and a verb phrase is when the verb consists of more than one word, typically 2, 3, or 4 words. Awesome. So let's focus on verb phrases. When you have a verb phrase, meaning that your verb consists of more than one word, all the words before the main verb are called auxiliary verbs. So when I say have done, This is a verb phrase. Have done. Done usually, or not usually, all the time, the last word in the verb phrase is the main verb. So the last word in the verb phrase is the main verb. And all the verbs or all the words before it inside the verb phrase, these are called auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs. Some people call them helping verbs. That's fine. You can call them auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. Both work. So in a verb phrase which consists of 2 or 3 or 4 words, the last word is all the time the main verb, and all the words before the last word, which is the main verb, are called auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. So in inversion, what we do is that we exchange the places of the subject and the first auxiliary. For example, when I say, they have never traveled to Spain before, that's a normal sentence. That's a sentence without any inversion. When I say, they have never traveled to Spain before. Awesome. They is the subject because they represents the people who have performed the verb. And have never traveled, have traveled, that's the verb phrase consisting of one auxiliary, which is have, and the main verb, which is traveled. If you begin your sentence with the adverbial never before, so instead of saying they have never traveled to Spain before, instead of saying that, you say never before at the beginning of the sentence. If you begin your sentence with an adverbial like that, you must make an inversion after it, which means that you have to place the first auxiliary verb before the subject. So the sentence becomes, never before have they traveled to Spain. So instead of saying they have never traveled to Spain before, which is a normal sentence without any inversion, instead of saying that, we begin our sentence with the adverbial, which is never before, and we say never before have they, so we put the auxiliary have before the subject they, we say never before have they traveled to Spain. By doing that, by placing the first auxiliary, we only have one auxiliary in this example, which is have. So by placing the first auxiliary, or the only auxiliary in this example, which is have, by placing it before the subject they, we have made an inversion. So what is the purpose of inversion? Why do we need it? Instead of saying they have never traveled to Spain before, what is the point? What is the purpose of changing the sentence by saying never before have they traveled to Spain? What is the point of doing that? Well, as I said in the beginning of the lesson, the point of inversion is to make your writing more formal. And as we know, and you mightn't know that, but I'm telling you, in English, your writing needs to be formal unless it's targeting people of your close circle. So if you aren't addressing someone whom you know well, if you aren't talking or writing to someone whom you know well, your writing or your speaking needs to be formal. So inversion is a writing technique that we use in order to formalize our writing or our speaking, of course, but most probably it's used in writing more than in speaking. So by using inversions, what you do is that you formalize your writing, which means that you make it more formal, meaning that it becomes more suitable for the contexts of formal communication. At the same time, when you do inversion or when you employ or utilize inversion in your writing or in your speaking, you add emphasis to the idea. So when I say They have never traveled to Spain before. That's less emphatic than saying never before have they traveled to Spain. The second one with the inversion, which is never before have they traveled to Spain, is more emphatic, containing more emphasis, more assurance, more assertion to the idea itself. It makes the idea more positive, more certain, stronger. Okay, so that's the main purpose. It adds emphasis to the element that postponed until later in the sentence. It emphasizes the element put or postponed until later in the sentence. Right, so what are the adverbials? I have a list of them here. What are the adverbials that we use at the beginning of the sentence and that we make inversions after them? So I'll give you a list right now. It's not a comprehensive list. It's not an exhaustive list. But these are the most common adverbials that whenever we start our sentence with, they have to be followed by an inversion. These adverbials are never, never before, rarely, seldom, and by the way, rarely and seldom, they have the same meaning. Barely, scarcely, and hardly, and those three also are synonyms. They have the same meaning. I'm talking here about barely, hardly, and scarcely. No sooner, I'm talking here again for people who haven't been with us from the beginning. This is a list of the adverbials that we need to make an inversion after them when we start the sentence with any of them. Let's carry on. Only after, only later, only if, only once, only then, only when, at no time, in no way, on no account, in or under no circumstances, not only, not until, not since, not for one moment, and little. So this is a list of about 15 or 20 adverbials. Whenever you begin your English with any of these adverbials, and that's typical in formal English, and in literary English, that's the English of poetry, of novels, of writing any formal piece of writing. In formal and literary English, whenever you begin your sentence with one of these adverbials, you make an inversion after them. And an inversion, as we said, it's exchanging the places between the subject and the first auxiliary verb by putting the first auxiliary verb or the only auxiliary verb, if there is only one, before the subject. So instead of saying, for example, we seldom have goods returned to us, we seldom, which means we rarely, we seldom have goods returned to us. You say, seldom do we have goods returned to us. So when you begin your sentence with seldom, you have to put the auxiliary, in this case it's do, with the, before the subject. So instead of saying we, that's the subject, instead of saying we seldom have goods returned to us, if you begin your sentence with seldom, it becomes seldom do we have goods returned to us. And this takes me to two important points. What is the function of an auxiliary? So why do we need an auxiliary verb in a sentence in addition to the main verb? We need it in order to make a question, in order to make a negative, or in order to make a tense. Auxiliaries in English are limited. There aren't a lot of verbs which are used as auxiliaries or as helping verbs. They are limited. They are well known. We're talking here about verb to be with all its forms, am, is, are, was, were, and the infinitive itself be. We're talking here about verb to have with its three forms, have, has, and had. We're talking about verb to do with its three forms, do, does, and did. And we're talking about all modals. When I say modals, and we shall have a lesson, a live lesson or a recorded video about modals at some time, modals are verbs like can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must. All of these are modals. So either modals, verb to be with all its forms, verb to have with all its forms, and verb to do with all its forms. These are the auxiliary verbs in English. Why do we need them? We need them either to make a question, or to make a negative, or to make a tense, or to put the sentence in the passive voice. Right, so when I was saying, or when I was defining for you the meaning of the word inversion, we said that in inversion, what we do is that we place the first auxiliary before the subject. So what happens is the sentence or the statement normally begins with the subject, followed by the auxiliary or the auxiliaries, and then followed by the main verb. And what we do in inversions is that we invert the places of the subject and the first auxiliary. So instead of the subject coming before the first auxiliary, we put the first auxiliary before it. And that's typical whenever we start or we begin our sentence with any of the adverbials that I have just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. What if the tense of the sentence is simple, like the present simple or the past simple? In these tenses, the verb consists of only one word, which means that we don't have a verb phrase. No, the verb consists of only one verb. For example, when I say, when I say Sam rarely sleeps late. Sam rarely sleeps late. So the verb here is sleeps and the subject is Sam. As you can see, the verb is not a verb phrase. It's a verb that consists of only one word, and that's sleeps. If I want to begin the sentence with the adverb rarely in order to add emphasis, in order to make the sentence more formal, more literary, how can I make the inversion here? I don't have any auxiliary verb. I don't have any helping verb in order to place it before the subject. You have to scrutinize or examine the tense of the sentence. In this particular example, Sam rarely sleeps late. The tense is the present simple. In the present simple tense, we have two auxiliaries, which are do and does. So if the subject is he or she or it or any equivalent to them, we use the auxiliary verb does. But if the subject is any other pronoun, just such as I, we, you, and they, we use the auxiliary verb do. So the subject in our example is Sam, and that's equivalent to he. So we say, rarely does Sam sleep late. Again, rarely, we're beginning our sentence with the adverbial here, which is rarely. So we say, rarely does Sam, because Sam is he, we can't use do with him, we must use does. Rarely does Sam sleep. In the normal sentence, it was sleeps, because Sam is he. In the present simple, we must add s to the verb if the subject is he or she or it or any of their equivalent. But after we have made the inversion, and because we have employed the auxiliary verb does, we must put the bare infinitive of the verb, which is simply the verb without any additions to it. We don't add anything to the verb. So instead of saying Sam rarely sleeps late, which is the normal sentence, after making the inversion, it becomes rarely does auxiliary verb, Sam subject, sleep bare infinitive because of using does, the auxiliary verb, which must be followed by the bare infinitive of the verb, and then the rest of the sentence, which is late. Another example, we, or let's say they live here until finding a new flat. They live here until finding a new flat. So if I want to begin our sentence with not until, so the adverbial that we are going to use in this example is not until. Not until they find a new flat Do they live here? So do is the auxiliary used with the subject they, because we cannot use does, and then the verb in the bare infinitive as we agreed, it should be live. Another example with did. If I say they stayed inside the house, they stayed inside the house under all circumstances, which means they didn't leave the house whatsoever. If I want to make an inversion in this sentence, so we make it as follows. Under no circumstances, what is the tense of the sentence? It's the past simple. And what's the auxiliary of the past simple? There is a single helping or auxiliary verb for the past simple tense, and that's did, and it's used with all pronouns and nouns with all subjects. So it becomes not under any circumstances or under no circumstances did they leave the house. So after did, just as the same case with does and do, we must use the bare infinitive of the verb. So instead of using left in the normal or the original sentence, it becomes leave in the inverted sentence due to the beginning of the sentence with not under any circumstances or under no circumstances did they leave the house. Awesome. So this is how you make an inversion, whether your tense contains auxiliary verbs or it doesn't. If it doesn't, this means it's a simple tense like the present simple or the past simple. And if it does, this means it's any of the other tenses: present perfect, future continuous, past continuous, and so on. Right, so what else are the uses of inversion? So in addition to using inversion after adverbials, what are the other occasions that we can use an inversion in? Right. There are two conversational expressions. One of them is called here comes, and the other is called there goes. Here comes and there goes. Here comes is used to say that somebody or something is moving towards the speaker. There goes is used to say that somebody or something is moving away from the speaker. So when I say, for example, here comes the bus, this is a sentence that contains an inversion because the verb comes is placed before the subject, the bus. When I say here comes the bus, this means that the bus is approaching us. The bus is coming towards us. So when I say here comes the bus, this is a sentence that contains an inversion as a result of using the conversational expression here comes. The subject, the bus, is placed after the verb comes. Another example with there goes. There goes Mo Salah, the footballer. There goes Mo Salah, the footballer. So as you can see, the subject here is Mo Salah, and it's placed after the verb goes. So this means that this sentence contains an inversion because we have begun our sentence with the conversational expression there goes. So there goes Mo Salah, the footballer, meaning that he's moving away from us. Here comes the conversational expression is also used to talk about something that's going to happen soon. For example, I can say, here comes lunch. Here comes lunch. This means that lunch is going to be served very soon, or that lunch is going to be ready very soon. This is also a sentence that contains an inversion. Here comes lunch. The verb comes is placed before the subject lunch. There goes is also used for other two purposes. We use there goes to say that the doorbell or the phone is ringing. So I can say, for example, there goes the phone, or there goes the doorbell. Could you answer it, please? There goes the phone. Could you answer it, please? Or there goes the doorbell. Could you answer it, please? This means that this expression, there goes, is used to say that the doorbell or that the phone is ringing, and maybe you're asking someone to answer them on your behalf. Here comes, as we said, is used to say that something is going to happen soon. And there goes is also used to say that a sum of money is wasted or is lost. You can say, for instance, my bike's been stolen. My bike's been stolen. My bike has been stolen. There goes $100. There goes $100. So the subject here is the sum of money or the amount of money, $100, and it's coming after the verb, which is goes. This means that there's an inversion in this sentence. So with these two conversational expressions, and that's a unique case of inversion, we found that the main verb is placed before the subject. Typically, in an inversion, the inversion happens between the subject and the first auxiliary. But in these two particular expressions, here comes and there goes, the inversion occurs between the subject and the main verbs, which are comes and goes, or come and go, according to the subject being singular or plural. Also, another famous function for inversion, or a place or a position for inversion, is when your sentence or your clause begins with a preposition. For example, look at this example. You can say, the door opened and in came the doctor. The door opened and in came the doctor. So the clause begins with the preposition in. Originally it was, and the doctor came in. So when the clause was beginning with the subject, the doctor, there was no inversion. But when we began it with the preposition in, we made an inversion between the subject and the verb, which is the door opened and in came the doctor. So the verb came is placed before the subject, the doctor. Another example for the same case. As soon as I let go of the string, the balloon went up. As soon as I let go of the string, the balloon went up. Let's begin the second clause with up. So as soon as I let go of the string, up went the balloon. So as you can see, when we began our clause with the preposition up, the verb went is placed before the subject, the balloon. So this is another case of inverting the subject with the main verb. So we invert the subject with the main verb when our clause begins with a preposition, like the last two examples we've mentioned, or with the conversational expressions, here goes, here comes, and there goes. Also, in conditional sentences, there is something that we call inverted conditionals. As we know, conditional sentences are 4 types. We will have a discussion about them in a separate lesson, but for now our topic is inversion. So we have 4 types of conditional sentences, types 0, 1, 2, and 3. If you want to make an inversion in type 1, replace if with should, and of course use the bare infinitive with it, because should is a modal verb. If you want to make an inversion in a conditional sentence of type 2, begin it with were, that's W-E-R-E, the past simple form of verb to be, and then use the to infinitive after it. I'll give you an example shortly. And then if your conditional sentence is of type 3, replace if with had. Examples. I have some examples here with me. For type 1, instead of saying, if you need more information, call our office, that's the normal conditional 1 sentence. After inversion, it becomes, should you need more information, call our office. So instead of saying, if you need, it becomes, should you need. We replaced if with should in a type 1 sentence. For type 2, another example for type 2, it would be a serious setback were the talks to fail. The original sentence was, if the talks failed, it would be a serious setback. This is a second conditional or a second type conditional. In order to make an inversion in it, we begin the sentence with were instead of if. So it becomes, were the talks to fail. So after were, we use the to infinitive of the verb. It would be a serious setback. Right, so in the first conditional, we replace if with should. In the second conditional, we replace if with were and we follow it with the to infinitive. In type 1, we replace it with should and we follow should with the subject and then the bare infinitive of the verb, because should is a modal verb and all modals must be followed by the bare infinitive of the verb. In type 3, I'll give you an example. If the phone had not rung, I wouldn't have woken up. That's a normal type 3 conditional sentence with no inversion. If you want to make an inversion in it, you replace if with had. So it becomes, had the phone not rung, I wouldn't have woken up. And by the way, if the type 3 conditional sentence is in the negative or the type 2 or the type 1, and you want to make an inversion in them, you mustn't use a contraction. You can't use the negative form contracted, meaning that it's in the short form. So you have to use it in the full form. So you cannot say, hadn't the phone rung. That's not correct. You must say, had the phone not rung, which is the full form of the negative, I wouldn't have woken up. Also, we can make an inversion after as and then in comparisons. For example, you can say, I believed, as did my colleagues. I believed, as did my colleagues, that the plan would work. Originally, the sentence was, I believed, as my colleagues did. But in order to make it more emphatic and to add emphasis to the sentence, we make an inversion after as. So it becomes, as did my colleagues. My colleagues is the subject. We put it later after the auxiliary did. Another example with than. Research shows that parents watch more television than do their children. So I'm putting here the auxiliary verb do before the subject, which is their children. I could have used the sentence without any inversion. I should have said it, or I could have said it. Research shows that parents watch more television than their children do. But this one, because it contains an inversion, we put the auxiliary before the subject, so it becomes than do their children. Be careful that we don't use an inversion with as and then if the subject is a pronoun. For example, look at this example. We now know a lot more about the universe than we did 10 years ago. Again, we now know a lot more about the universe than we did 10 years ago. Here after than, the subject is we, which is a pronoun. So we cannot say, than did we 10 years ago. No, because the subject is a pronoun. So we have to place the subject before the verb and we refrain from making any inversion. It becomes than we did 10 years ago. We can also use an inversion with words like neither, nor, and so. So after neither and nor and so, we make inversions by putting the first auxiliary or the only auxiliary, if there is only one, before the subject. For example, I adore tennis. I adore tennis. And so does Becky. After so, we put the auxiliary before the verb. We make an inversion. It becomes and so does Becky. Example with neither. For some time after the explosion, Jack couldn't hear, and neither could he see. For some time after the explosion, Jack couldn't hear, and neither could he see. The auxiliary here is the modal verb could. We place it before the subject, so it becomes, and could he see. An example with nor. The council never wanted the new supermarket to be built. The council never wanted the new supermarket to be built, nor did the residents or the local residents. So because we have nor here, we put an inversion or we make an inversion after it. So we say, nor did the local residents. The local residents is the subject and the auxiliary verb is did. We place the auxiliary verb, which is did, before the subject after nor. So we have talked about 5 words after which we can make inversions. These are neither, nor, So, and also in comparisons, as and then, but make sure that in comparisons, if you want to make an inversion after as and then, you must make sure that the subject is not a pronoun, because if it's a pronoun, inversions do not work. Also, another famous structure in English is using the pattern so plus an adjective or an adverb plus that. So plus an adjective or an adverb plus that. We will talk about adjectives and adverbs in a separate video as well. You can make an inversion in such a pattern or in such a structure. So instead of saying the weather conditions became so dangerous, the weather conditions became so dangerous that all the mountain roads were closed. This is a normal sentence without any inversion containing the pattern so plus adjective plus that. How can we employ inversion here? You begin your sentence with so, and you follow it with the adjective or the adverb, then the inversion, then the that clause. So it becomes, so dangerous did the weather conditions become. So dangerous did the weather conditions become that all the mountain roads were closed. So instead of using so plus adjective or adverb plus a that clause, you can begin your sentence with so, follow it with the same adjective or adverb, and then follow it with the inversion and then with the that clause. Also the same pattern or the same structure, that's so plus adjective or adverb plus a that clause, it can also be replaced with such plus verb to be plus noun plus a that clause. Putting verb to be before the noun, meaning that we're putting the verb, which is verb to be, before the subject, which is the noun. So beginning your sentence with such and following it with verb to be and then a noun, which is the subject, and then a that clause, this is a replacement for the pattern or the structure so plus adjective or adverb plus a that clause. For example, the play is so popular that the theater is full every night. Again, the play is so popular, so plus adjective, that the theater is full every night. This is the that clause. How can we replace it with such and an inversion? We say, such is the popularity of the play. So instead of using the adjective popular, we use the noun of that adjective, which is popularity. So such, verb to be after it, is, then the noun, the popularity of the play, it's a noun phrase in this case, and then the that clause, that the theater is full every night. So the original sentence was, the play is so popular that the theater is full every night. It becomes, such is the popularity of the play that the theater is full every night. Right, so to recapitulate briefly or to recap briefly on what has been said in this live lesson, we were talking about inversions. We said that inversion is mainly placing the first auxiliary or the only auxiliary before the subject, which is not the normal convention for sentences in English. In English, sentences typically begin with the subject followed by the verb, being a verb of a single word, or with the verb phrase if the verb is composed of more than one word, one or more auxiliaries, and then the main verb. In inversions, we place the first auxiliary or the only auxiliary before the subject, or sometimes we put the main verb itself before the subject, like when we start our clause or our sentence with a preposition or with the conversational expressions, here comes and there goes. We explained the functions of auxiliary verbs in English, and we also talked about the different adverbials that whenever we start our sentence with, it necessitates making an inversion after them. And we said that inversion is mainly or primarily used in English writing, because writing is most probably targeting people whom we don't know very well. So unless you're addressing someone that you have a close relationship with, your writing or your speaking needs to be formal. And the inversion or the technique that we have discussed in our video today is a technique that formalizes or makes your writing or your speaking more formal, accordingly more appropriate to addressing people with whom you have a distant relationship or even whom you don't know at all. So your speaking or your writing towards those people need to be formal, and Inversion assists you big time in formalizing your writing and your speech. This was the very first lesson in a series of lessons that I am going to call live lessons. It happened to be grammar today, but this doesn't mean that all our live lessons will be about grammar. As I said at the beginning of the live video or the live stream, some of our videos will be tackling vocabulary with all its types: formal, informal, academic vocabulary, business vocabulary. Our live lessons also will tackle tips on how to improve the four language skills. I'm talking here about reading and writing, listening and speaking, in addition to providing you with tips on how to expand your real life English, or as I call street English, which is the everyday English that when you are capable of using it and when you are mastering it, this means that you can cope with native speakers very well. Please subscribe to my channel if you like the content that I provide, or if it's appealing to you, if it's useful to you. I look forward to seeing you in our next video, our next live stream, or our next lesson and session. All in all, thank you very much for being with me, and see you next time. Goodbye.